Major General Paul Knapp is the Adjutant General for Wisconsin. He commands the Wisconsin National Guard and is responsible for emergency management. He also serves as Wisconsin's Homeland Security Advisor. He chairs the Homeland Security Council and serves as a senior state official for all cyber matters. So here we go with the video, assuming my technology works. All right, please join me in welcoming Major Paul Knapp.
Great. Thank you. So before I get started, just a couple things. A lot of stuff up there. There were 4 divisions of the Department of Military Affairs, and it's one of the things we're working on is there's a gap up there, and we'll kind of maybe get to it in the questions a little bit at the end, and that's a division of Homeland Security. And we're working right now on getting that, which would encompass cybersecurity. Right now it's kind of a pickup game, if you will, between the state divisions that are out there as well as some of my workforce inside of the Department of Military Affairs. About me, I've been in the military just over 30 years, but I'm from Antigo, Wisconsin. So does anybody know where Antigo, Wisconsin is? A couple people? All right, well, actually the majority, wow. See, I guess as I travel further north up here, more people know where Antigo is. So from Antigo, Wisconsin, I've been in the Air Force now for over 30 years, but a lot of that was as a reservist, as a citizen soldier, or citizen airman in my case. And so it's exciting to be back in Wisconsin. It couldn't be a bigger honor than to be the Adjutant General for the state. So with that, so my speaking style is, I like to talk off the cuff, and I like to sometimes use a script. My staff has told me that when I combine them, that it's a disaster. So bear with me as I'm going to start with the scripted portion, but I may go off script a little bit. So, and then we'll, at the end, there'll be definitely time for questions. So, all right. So we've already had the introduction. I'd like to begin today by recognizing that, as Craig mentioned, that everyone here realizes the importance of cybersecurity and the role that it plays in our day-to-day lives. Otherwise, you really wouldn't be here today. But the one thing that I'm going to touch on a couple places today is that the threat out there is persistent and it's ongoing, and we are actually under attack right now. Right now, nation-state actors, China, Russia, Korea, Iran are the big ones that are actually trying to get into our networks and affect these things that we have here that I've got shown up here on the screen. So the economic front, financial realm here, this is when I'm trying to combine the freestyle with the script. Labor shortages, the pandemic response, information domain, and of course the cyber domain. The cyber domain does not have the same type of boundaries as traditional domains do. This means our adversaries don't have to travel to the United States or to Wisconsin to attack our infrastructure, our businesses, property, or people. To combat this, a fundamental paradigm shift has to become necessary, or is necessary at every single level, whether it's in government or in private enterprise. Not just the National Guard and the Department of Defense, but each and every one of you here today will affect the cybersecurity defense of this nation across the infrastructure, supply chains, our homes, all those different attack surfaces that are out there in the cyber domain. So what does it look like? Let me start with some statistics. The Internet Crime Complaint Center, or IC3, it's a division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation concerning suspected internet facilitated criminal activity. So IC3 reported approximately 840,000 complaints regarding cybersecurity in 2021 for a total loss of $6.9 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars nationwide. Compared to the 2020, a year prior, there were only 790,000 complaints, only 790,000 complaints, and 4.2 billion in losses. So basically, they'd receive over 2,300 complaints a day and 552,000 average complaints a year. It's between 2020 and 2021 alone, that's a 25% increase. So as fast as technology is advancing, that's as fast as our adversaries are advancing as well. So those are, and actually, and the other thing is that those are just the losses that we know about and that are reported. And that's another challenge too. There are a lot of losses out there that nobody wants to talk about. And I know Craig mentioned partnerships and information sharing, intel sharing. That is huge in this realm. It's huge across a number of different enterprises and areas, but in cybersecurity, we really need to get better at sharing across not just governmental agencies, but between public and private entities as well. So what is Congress doing about this? What is the nation doing? Congress has approved the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, which is providing funding for cybersecurity grant programs across the country. Funding will be used to address cybersecurity risks and other threats to information systems owned by state, local, or tribal governments. That's $1 billion over 4 years between the 54 states and territories. So it's a decent amount of money. And then you may ask, well, what is the state of cybersecurity in Wisconsin? So Wisconsin, we're ranked 15th out of 50 states in internet crime complaints to the IC3. And both businesses and government entities such as schools have been the targets of repeated ransomware, phishing, and cyber attacks. In fact, in the last year, there have been at least 3 different school districts across the state who have been victims of ransomware attacks. So let's see. Yeah, and then just in Wisconsin, now going to the next slide there, yeah, we've got, it breaks down to about $51 million of losses this year alone in Wisconsin. Business email compromise is Wisconsin's top victim loss attack vector. It's making up close to $18 million of that $51 million that I mentioned. Successful phishing has given threat actors basically an open door into our organizations. And once the door is open, they're free to steal our personal data, our intellectual property, cause disruptions, plant ransomware, or spread laterally throughout our networks and across networks. Ransomware has halted operations and kept our children out of school. I just mentioned that, with denial of service attacks as well, disrupting operations of businesses in the state of Wisconsin. So what are we doing about it? So as I kind of mentioned earlier at the top of my presentation, and we're planning to use some of the cybersecurity grant money to really get our structure in place and aligned with the federal government. I'll talk in a minute about CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agency, which falls under DHS. And so cybersecurity writ large across the nation, we generally consider that a subcomponent of Homeland Security. And that's why CISA, who I'll mention talk a little bit more in a few minutes, is under the Department of Homeland Security. So in addition to that, cyber is an emerging discipline in the military, but also one in which the National Guard can have increasing impact because it represents a domain in which our personnel can leverage their civilian expertise and skill sets. So you have National Guard members during the day, they work potentially in your organizations. Do I have anybody in the National Guard out here? Members of the National Guard? Shoot. Okay, well, I have a number you can call to join the National Guard after this because we are always recruiting. So Captain Gerasimov down in front here will give you a card after the presentation if you're thinking about joining our team. All right, I digress. Okay, so we have the 176 Cyber Protection Team. This group of soldiers recently did an entire year of activation out east at one of the cyber bases on federal orders fighting the cyber mission. So basically, now they've all come back to Wisconsin. Most of them live in Wisconsin, and they're traditional Guard men and women who work out there in the community, largely in the cyber arena. So they take those capabilities that they learn, and this is high-end DoD level cybersecurity operations at the international level that they were operating on, and that's our folks right here from Wisconsin. Couldn't be more proud of the 176th. Wish I could talk more about the specifics, but I think you all get the idea about what they were doing. Next, our Cybersecurity Operations Directorate is growing, and a crucial component of our National Guard Cyber Response Force, training directly with our volunteer cyber response teams to prepare for a response to critical infrastructure in our state. Additionally, we have Wisconsin Emergency Management, who works diligently to administer Homeland Security grants specific to cybersecurity. So in the past, we've always had Homeland Security grants, and we've branched off a chunk of that and earmarked it just for cybersecurity across the state. But now recently, as I mentioned, there are specific cybersecurity grant programs that are being administered between both CISA under DHS and FEMA are both players, and that's to get our cybersecurity foundational principles across the 54 states and territories up to par for follow-on grant work. Let's see. So we also have, additionally, and this is where I mentioned it on the outset, we have Wisconsin's Department of Enterprise Technology. So DET is a subset of Department of Administration in the state of Wisconsin. And DET is primarily responsible for the enterprise technology network within the state. So the state network, where all of our state business occurs, to include things like the My Vote. What is it called? My Vote, which is a big thing here now, where you go in and you request your absentee ballot, and then you can check on it later on. They post results there as well. So really important, and and as you can imagine, it's critical that cybersecurity of those functions of the state remains intact. So our Chief Information Officer for the state resides in Department of Enterprise Technology, as well as our Chief Information Security Officer resides in the Department of Information Technology. Another thing here in Wisconsin I'd like to talk about is WICTRA. He didn't want me to point him out, but I'll have him wave his hand over here. So we got a WICTRA rep in the group. So the Wisconsin Cyber Threat Response Alliance, or WICTRA, they have hands-on training for cybersecurity personnel in a partnership with UW Oshkosh Cybersecurity Center for Excellence. So basically providing a sandbox and training environment where we can get out there and train. That's available. I think he's going to mention it to you all at some point today, but I'll give a plug to them because they definitely are available for exercises, training, sandbox environment, sort of facilitating for cybersecurity exercises. Was that fair? Did I mess that up? Okay, good. All right, so I didn't go too far astray on that one. Cyber response team. Okay, so what the cyber response team is, it's co-led by by the CISO and DET and my folks at DMA between the cyber responders. We've got, it originally started a couple years ago with 60 volunteers that we call on. Now, these are folks out in the community. They could be in business, they could be in state government, local, county government, who have cybersecurity expertise. So this cybersecurity response team, what we do is we bring them in for quarterly training, and we also provide some of the cybersecurity tools. But that group has grown to about 300 or so across the state of trained responders. Not all available at once, as you can imagine, but we've been able to, those ransomware attacks that I mentioned earlier that had occurred in the state, those were responded to between DMA, or by DMA, people from DET, as well as our volunteer cyber response team members across the state. So if you can imagine, there's that initial response to, say, a ransomware attack, which I'll put a plug in right now. Is one of the things I learned is that the first thing they should do is, if they have insurance, they need to call their insurance provider. And so we make sure that everybody stays in line with the insurance provider. And more, I'm surprised the number of folks that actually have cyber attack and cyber insurance. So we've got over 300 of those those folks who are prepared to respond, and we're continuing, like I said, offering quarterly in-person and virtual training to get those people up to speed. So I'd recommend y'all take a look at that potentially too, because if there's folks in your organizations that might want to volunteer for that, it also offers them training opportunities and exercising on a quarterly basis to keep their skills up to snuff. Okay. CISA, I promised to talk about CISA. So Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. So Bill Nash is our CISA rep for the state of Wisconsin. He was the former state of Wisconsin Cyber Information Security Officer. And we have one right now, but I think they're either advertising it or they have advertised. He's located in Madison. And CISA has authorized an additional position for Milwaukee, to be based in Milwaukee. And so, like it says in the title there, it's cybersecurity and infrastructure. They do go hand in hand in many instances, but they are two, generally thought of as two separate functions. But as you're going to hear a lot today, I don't think that any function that we do today really can be divided out from cyber or cybersecurity. So CISA is collaborating with our volunteer cyber response team as well to offer assessments to critical infrastructure, which leads to identifying and mitigating vulnerabilities. So another key thing with those volunteers that we have, so CISA offers a program where you can request a vulnerability assessment, and they've got a huge waiting list of people, because it's really just Bill Nash for the state. And so what he's doing is he's helping with our training, and then we're using the cyber response teams, those volunteer teams, working with Bill to help do some of those assessments across the street and get some of those, as many of those knocked out as we can. I don't have the specific numbers on that, but if anybody's interested in that, definitely get with me afterwards and I can get you more of the specifics. So the combination of these efforts has greatly increased Wisconsin's capability to prevent and respond to cyber events. So I've talked a little bit now about what we've done and what we're doing, but what does that mean to all of you? So these aren't just nebulous assets. These are assets that are available. And one of the things that it requires in order to access these assets is to be willing to admit that you have, that you want help. I'll say need help, but want help in getting out there and making that call. There are a number of different ways that you can get the call elevated to us at the state level, but the State Emergency Operations Center is probably the best way. Every single county in the state has a county emergency manager, and they're the best conduit to get into that system. We have an electronic system that we use for tracking requests for assistance, but that's not necessary. A simple phone call might be the best way to start to your county emergency manager. So that if you don't already have it in your response plan, your county emergency manager's number, that may be one of the things you want to add to your emergency incident response plan. Okay. So, we do have these services that we can offer and assist across the state. But as we're all here today to learn more and share intel, it really comes down to that it's everybody's responsibility. Each and every one of us in this auditorium here today, and all the rest out there, because we're all connected in some way, shape, or form. And we can't wait until a cyber attack occurs or an incident happens to start prioritizing cybersecurity. Risk management and cyber hygiene are the key place to start. And there are published lists of top cyber hygiene items that must be taken care of as a minimum. So if you haven't done that, I'd recommend you start there. It's difficult to prioritize cybersecurity within your organization if it's not part of your budget. Right, and so that's another big part. We got to make sure that this is cybersecurity is brought to the highest levels. I think I'm talking to a lot of folks at the higher levels. So hopefully you have the budget and the support of your company to prioritize this, because as we know, if it doesn't get budget, then it doesn't get done. All right, I talked about the vulnerability assessments. These are critical. Getting a vulnerability assessment, either internally from internal expertise that you have. Recommend getting external vulnerability assessments. Get a clean look at your system. Somebody who can come in, whether that's a contract system or a request through CISA for one of those vulnerability assessments. Do you all have cybersecurity officers at the executive level? That's also critical. Having somebody in cybersecurity at the table when you're making critical corporate decisions, and they can think about additional attack surfaces, possible attack vectors that could really put your company, your corporation at risk by not considering it up front when you're doing your planning. Multi-factor authentication came up in our sidebar discussion. Hopefully this is becoming one of those things that's just everyone's getting used to. I think I had to do multi-factor authentication 10 or 12 times yesterday, and not having to do with work, just banking, other things. I'm actually working on my taxes, so I had to do tax stuff, but a lot of multi-factor authentication out there. And it can be, a lot of people see it as a pain, but that is as a minimum standard today, something I highly encourage you to do. If you can't do it for everybody, for whatever reason, at least start with your administrator accounts. Get that multi-factor authentication going on them. Incident response plans. This is another one. Do you have one? Can you access your incident response plan if your network is down? So if you're subject to a ransomware attack, does that also take out your incident response plan? Okay, that's something definitely to think about. And then have you exercised it? Do a no-kidding exercise. Start off with a tabletop, small group. Do an exercise in the military and Department of Military Affairs, DET. We do exercises all the time, as you probably realize, and they definitely have value. And a lot of things come out of those that you may never would have thought. For a while in my career, I did flight test for the Boeing Corporation. It was my job to kind of break things and see if they work. And the engineers were always amazed at the things as pilots that we did, that they never in a million years thought that anyone would push those two buttons at the same time and expect some result that they had never thought of. So that's really the key to exercising your plans, because until you actually go out there and do it, you don't know what the response is going to be. Okay, so the threats, it's not just from cyber criminals, but advanced persistence threat. A lot of these attacks originate from, are sponsored and supported by the People's Republic of China, the PRC. So I talk a lot about China lately, both on the military side and on the Homeland Security domestic operations side. The bottom line is they're about 25 years into a 50-year plan to take over as the world, the number one country in the world. They're on track. They have been able to do it largely unopposed and largely aided, frankly, by the United States. And so I do say that it's one of the first things I think about in the morning when I wake up is, what is China doing today to try to become the leader. Another thing I like to say is I was stationed in Alaska for a while, and if you don't think it's a big deal for China to be to take over as the number one power in the world, the analogy we used in Alaska, where sled dog racing was very popular, there was a T-shirt and it had a picture of a back end of a husky, and it said, "If you're not the lead dog, the view is always the same." And so think about that for a second. We're the lead dog. We very much enjoy that. But if we want to continue to be the lead dog into the future, we have to take these international threats, in particular China, Russia, seriously. In fact, this morning on one of my feeds, I saw that there's a Russian hacking group that just today claims to have taken over 5 different state networks. All today. So it was on one of my feeds. Haven't seen any confirmation of that. That was just a news feed. But it is a 24/7, 365 around the clock effort to both take our money, break our stuff, take our intellectual property, and take over our position as the world leader. So something that you all should be thinking about each and every day. Okay, so none of us can mitigate this threat alone. It definitely is a team of teams. It's a team effort. It's not just going to go away. And if we think that by just preventing one of the categories of cyber threats is not going to help, phishing, ransomware, whatever it is, it's going to be collaboration, information sharing, and treating cyber attacks as the existential threat that it is. Those are 3 things that should be built into everything that all of us do when it comes to cybersecurity. There's another thing that I like to talk about is that the last place you want to be exchanging business cards is at the scene of an emergency, right? You want to have those business cards in your pocket, in your Rolodex. For all of us in our phones, I'm sure. In fact, I got another story that I want to tell. So this is an interesting story about that and about having your network and having your sharing up front. So one of the pillars of the National Guard. So our first thing is that we're the primary combat reserve for the Army and the Air Force. The second is that we are the first military responder in the homeland for domestic operations. And third is our partnership mission. So not a lot of people know that we have over 90 partnerships between Wisconsin state National Guard states and foreign countries. So Wisconsin, we've been a partner with Nicaragua for over 20 years. That has been largely dormant since the current political regime has taken over and we don't have normalized military relations. But we recently got Papua New Guinea as a new partner. I'm not going to go into the whole story about why that makes sense, but I'm excited to go over there in December and sign the partnership agreement. But the story I want to tell has to do with the conflict that's going on right now in Ukraine. Russia attacked Ukraine. Through our state partnership program, we've had a training mission in Ukraine since Ukraine became an independent country. So we've been over there training them. U.S. military has ever since then, and it's largely a National Guard mission. And so when Russia attacked, of course, we pulled all of our soldiers out of that training mission. But about, a couple weeks into the war there, a Washington State National Guard soldier got a WhatsApp message from a Ukrainian soldier that he had trained and that they had stayed in contact through WhatsApp. And the message on WhatsApp said, I can't remember the misfire steps for the Javelin anti-tank missile. Can you help me? Right? And so, this kid's in Washington State saying, holy cow, they're at war right now. If he needs the steps for this, like he's in the middle of a combat operation. And so I don't know if he did it through memory or if he looked it up, but he quickly typed in the misfire steps for the Javelin missile, hit send on WhatsApp, and then waited, right? Can you imagine that wait? Right? So 20 or 30 minutes go by, and then the next, his phone beeped, and he looked at it, and it was WhatsApp, and it was his buddy in Ukraine sending a video of a burning Russian tank. And he says it worked. So it's not the time of the emergency or the time, that's not the time to share contact information. And I tell all my folks that if you don't have the number actually programmed in your phone, you probably aren't going to call it when there's an emergency going on. So anyway, I did digress a little bit on that one. That wasn't in my script. So actually, that's probably a good way to go to questions. I've been able to talk a little bit about how we're organized in the state, some of the things that we offer. I am kind of kicking it off here. I'm going to open it up for questions, but I'm warning you, I'm not a down in the weeds keyboard cybersecurity guy, but I definitely can talk to some of the organization of the state if you have questions on that. So I'm going to open it up and see if we have any questions. Got one in the back.
Yeah, thanks for your message today. Thanks for being here in service to the country. A couple quick questions would be, you talked about grant programs under the IIJA. Do you foresee to be in grant programs to say support private organizations that fall under like CISA's definition of critical infrastructure to help them build out more robust cybersecurity systems?
So this first round, the short answer is I'm not sure, and that as I was rehearsing my presentation, I thought that's going to be a good question. Somebody's going to ask that. So the first round in particular is designed, because this is brand new, to get the state, county, and local governments set up, primarily aligned. Even I kind of look at it; it's almost more organizationally than actually down in the nuts and bolts, like buying equipment for cybersecurity. So I don't know the answer to that. What I've seen so far is that it's state, local, county, tribal is on this first round of grants. And I don't know if anybody, the other speakers today, know any more information on that, but if they do, we'll get it to you in the next speakers. Of course.
I know that IC3 has been inundated with complaints and whatnot. We're in a position to make a complaint to them in late June this year, and never received any sort of response or anything like that from the FBI. Is there more localized or like state level agencies that we can work with?
Yes.
Others in contact?
Yeah, I definitely, and I haven't actually gone in to see how that complaint thing is. I'm guessing it's a web form you fill out. Straightforward, right? But as soon when you do that, then I would do that county emergency manager, have them send it up to the state for the cyber folks. You can also go straight to DET at the state. The cool thing about going through your emergency manager in the county is that's kind of how we're leaning toward having that organization across the state in the future. And the more we can get them on board with the process of emergency manager to state emergency management. And then we basically, the way state emergency management works, it's a coordinating agency. So Wisconsin Emergency Management, basically, regardless of what you need from the state, you pretty much can call through your emergency manager or directly to Wisconsin Emergency Management. You can call and ask for assistance from the state, anything from a flood to roads out, or we don't have potable water, to a cyber attack, and then you go there, and then Wisconsin Emergency Management is largely a coordinating agency to look and see exactly what the best state resources are available to solve that problem or address the need out in the local communities. Yep, great. All right, anyone else? Oh, geez.
If you could talk to the leaders and the decision makers of businesses in Wisconsin, what would you ask them for help? How can they help you and your team's mission?
Boy, that's a good question. You should have given me that one earlier to think about. Let's see. Well, so I think a lot of the things that I mentioned in here, the big things in terms of the leadership is when it comes to cybersecurity and in particular incidents, threats, intel, is that sharing piece. I mentioned earlier, we talked about it kind of a little bit in the sidebar of the Colonial Pipeline issue, which is a big one. That was very, very difficult for anybody to get any information on what exactly had happened. And I'm talking at even in the CISA level, the state level, those of us who are trying to get the word out so that if there's a gap somewhere or a vulnerability, we want to be able to share that. And I think a lot of that's going to be partnerships in advance, whether that's in your sector, particularly in a critical infrastructure area, that the other folks that have that equipment or have that capability or have that type of infrastructure, whether it's water, power, transportation, any of those things that might have something similar. And actually a good, just thinking about that, might be there are so many associations out there, that might be a great way to network some of this. I'm not sure, I'm kind of off the cuff a little bit on the answer, but there are tons of different associations that may be specific to that particular industry. But the big thing is share intel, share best practices, and then on that day when you actually have find a vulnerability, hopefully you're able to stop it. But if you weren't, especially, then let everybody know. Thank you.
I have a question about the information and investment job act that you talked about. $1 billion investment in 54 states. I read an article not long ago where local technical colleges were being supported with this money or federal funded money. It's surprising that out of the 15 colleges that were identified in the United States, 4 were from Northeast Wisconsin. So can you share any information as to what these funds are? How can we as business owners use it, if at all any? Training, internal training, for job enhancements, whatever it is.
So again, it's pretty new, but what I would say, that's great. And I didn't really foot stomp it, but we are actually, believe it or not, we're actually a lot of times in Wisconsin leading the way on a lot of the our cyber programs, like our cyber response teams that volunteer. So the one that has the educators up in the northeastern part of the state, I'm not familiar with the specifics of that, but they're probably tied in with their emergency management folks and their local or state government in order to get into that grant program. Because that's kind of the entry path, is having where the grant awardee is going to be state, county, local government. And then their plan, though, could include not necessarily grant awardees, but it could cover potentially training for folks in their counties. Not exactly sure on that, but more to follow. That sounds like a popular one. I'm going to have to get some follow-up materials out on this. All right, what else? Okay. Oh.
Sharing, what's the best way to share information? Like, is there like a particular email address or information you can send us that we can share if we see things?
Yeah, so I think the cyber response team, and I should have put that slide in too. I'll get my briefing better for next time. But basically, I'll get that out to you all. The cyber response teams are the ones that do the that I mentioned, the 300 volunteers, and that's co-led by the CISO and Sarah Frater at the National Guard. And I'll get that up at the break, and we'll make sure that you all have an email and phone number for that before I leave. Okay. All right, well, it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to talk to you today. I am going to stick around for some of the social and meeting with the vendors, so feel free to come up and sidebar me for any other questions you might think of. Thanks.